So, welcome.
So what's the actual image they see?
Oh, forgot to pin up. That's what they see.
All right, so we should... Yeah, welcome back everybody. I saw quite a lot of you already made their assignments or at least started, and yeah, pretty much looking forward to what we'll get to see there. Is there any kind of specific feedback you want to give right at the beginning? Yeah. Well, we started with everything quite bare metal, and today we'll switch to actual Rails stuff, and everything will be quite magic there anyway. So, but you're right. I forgot about that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I guess the others didn't hear what you say, or did they?
Yeah, the others did hear, but
the
right. Video recording did not hear it.
Ah, all right. Yeah, but I do know that there is, in principle, some kind of there are some pitfalls running this stuff on Windows. I think this Ruby installer stuff might be the alternative to do it on Windows. I mean, yeah, so probably it's not that necessary. So I guess we won't be using so very super specific get gem sets or Ruby versions. So if you just get things up and running, you should be fine. The only thing I really advised is not to use the system installed Ruby because you'll have to use sudo to install certain things, and that's well just annoying. Apart from that, it's just fine. I do know that this is a little bit of there might be a little bit of trouble getting things running on Windows, but yeah, that's this special skills are required there. All right. Yeah. Well, somewhere. The memory is the limit. No, just make a cut wherever you like it. It's really just a matter of getting things up and playing around with the Ruby stuff, and just finding the problem is probably the most important part of it. So it's just whatever decision you take, it's just fine. Yeah, at least you're doing the test.
It's fine.
Okay.
Especially in Rails, it's slightly different.
Yes, totally.
We could get into this today.
The appointments for today really was just to get you to get the setup running and to familiarize you with the language and the ecosystems a little bit. We'll go into everything reasonable today, hopefully. All right.
Internal Lehre, Web Engineering. I put the link on the assignment page.
Back in a second.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So today we thought we should be diving really into the Rails stuff. There were just some small things I wanted to show about Ruby arrays, just for shits and giggles again. Would you mind switching to the? Yes, lovely. Thank you so much. Is it big enough, or should I make it a little bit bigger? The typo? Yeah, I guess it's fine. Yeah, just to, because it's stuff that's pretty convenient to use every now and then. If you have two arrays, for arrays in Ruby, they implement quite set-like behavior. So if you say if you use the AND between arrays, it's the intersection. If you use OR between arrays, it will be the union. And if you use minus, it will just do the set minus. And especially if you do something like, so if you have another array, it will just, which may of course have double entries. And if you say, you ampersand it with itself, it will behave set-like. You can of course use the unique call. This does the same, but yeah, whenever you need sets, the standard Ruby array thing can behave in a proper way already. Just there is a set too, but yeah, every now and then it's just convenient to have these intersection and union things at your fingertips. One thing to notice, last time I talked about overriding certain methods. The single ampersand and single pipe can be overridden. The double ones are really logical, so they are really a language structure. They can't be overridden. They are not functions, but they are really language constructs. Whereas the ampersand and the pipe symbol are well, just normal functions. Yeah, this is just something I wanted to show to you because I think it's quite neat to have it at your fingertips. All right. So yeah, today we'll really dive into the actual Rails stuff. So we'll start producing some kind of web application actually. Just to get an impression, who of you already has some experience with HTML stuff? Who has at least seen it? Or who hasn't? Probably better to say who has no experience with HTML. All right, so this is great. So because I really don't want to go into explaining what a p tag is. You just use it. All right, so. We'll just start the same way as almost every Ruby tutorial does. Just switch to Ruby 3 and go to some directory where just tap this. Well, find enough. Not cool. And to set up a Rails project, you first have to install Rails. If you just say gem install Rails, it will install the latest version. I should have it already. No, I didn't. And if you then say Rails new your application name, whatever, calculate, then quite some big tree of files will be created already. Everything's scaffolded, and then the dependencies are installed, and the JavaScript dependencies are installed, which takes some time as always. And then we'll have a look at the structure that was actually created there. We can do that while JavaScript is still installing stuff. So
zoom in.
I don't know how to change the size here. Can you? I don't know how to change the size there.
Just change your screen resolution.
All right. A little bit better now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh. All right, so this is huge then. We should.
Yeah.
Okay. So this Rails new command created the actual application tree, which you can see on the left, and we should probably just quickly go through the directories. We'll dive deeper into that during the course, but just to get a quick idea. The first real directory is the app directory. This is the place where you actually put your real code normally. Rails is an MVC framework, model view controller. This is something everybody should be familiar with. Are you? No, so yeah, otherwise just cry. Or call. Crying is, you can do that later. Yeah, in the app directory you find assets, which is for images and certain JavaScript and stylesheet files. Isn't used that much anymore today. Maybe mostly fonts and images. Channels isn't important for now, has to do with WebSockets. Controllers is where the controllers go. In the very beginning, there's just one application controller, which is quite empty. Helpers, yeah, view helpers, stuff you can use in your views to simplify your life. JavaScript, obviously JavaScript. Jobs is for background workers that are not running in the web context, but in a background context. Mailers is to send emails. Models is really the business models, which in Rails normally correspond to tables in a database. We use a object rational mapper called active record. We'll go into this later too. And in the views directory, you find the actual HTML view code. Bin is auto-created. There are some helper binaries that you can use from the command line. This is something you don't normally touch. In the config directory, you find, for example, the database configuration. This is really huge. Good. Okay. As you might see, there is this development, test, and production. Rails always expects you to have at least these three different environments for development, test, and production, and uses different databases for them, which are normally, of course, structurally identical, but they are different databases. The specific configurations of these environments are in this environments directory. So this is the specific configuration for the development, production, and test. It has quite a lot to do with automatic reloading and stuff like that, and caching. And so when you're playing around in development, you might find Rails a little bit slow. This is mainly because of the settings that are used in development. In production, things are much more snappy. Initializers contains files that are executed when the system starts up. You might, in general, this is used to really initialize certain parts of the application. It's not code that's supposed to be business code, or it's really just setup code, or mostly at least. Locales, Rails always thinks that you might want to use I18N and have your strings translated by default. And Webpack is the configuration for the Webpack gem, which is responsible for dealing with the JavaScript and CSS stuff. In the DB directory, currently there's just the seeds file where you can put stuff that's you use to populate the database when starting to play with it. It's generally, I guess it's empty already. Yeah, really just empty currently. But there will be the migration files that they use to define the actual database tables and other database-related stuff. Lib is quite technical. Again, you normally don't really touch stuff that's inside there. Storage is a place where you may or may not store uploaded files. In test, there is quite a big tree of stuff because Rails generally expects you to test your shit. So for every model you create and for every controller you create, you're supposed to actually create a test in there and run them. And then there's the place where you can just drop in foreign code that you can't import otherwise. You're not supposed to remember everything I said. It's really just to give you a brief idea about what the structure of this thing is like. I guess nobody really sets this up by hand. This is always done with the Rails new command, because it's really just really a lot of files, and you really don't have to touch everything. We could probably a good idea to just put everything under version control so we can see the differences that we make during the course today. All right, so we set up this Rails directory, and oh yeah, a little bit small probably. There's always this trade-off between readability and usability. All right, so this is where we did this Rails new thing. And then we just started. So Rails server, which can be abbreviated as just Rails S. So it tells you it's booting Puma. Puma is the actual web server that's used in development. It tells you a Rails application is starting up, and gives you some information about the Puma settings. They really don't matter. And it's listening on 127.0.0.1 3000. So 3000 is the default port. And yay, you are on Rails. Or we are on Rails. This is just a default page that's served, so we don't even find that. It's somewhere in the library code. So we should now add some actual, some own code. So this is too small. Won't be able to see anything here. We should go into a little bit of HTTP now and explain a little bit about how HTTP requests actually work. And the typical look of an ordinary GET request, which is what you get when you're just loading here, is you're telling the server you want to get / using HTTP 1.1 on the host 127.0.0.1. Yeah. 3000. So what we're now doing is we're doing what the browser does. So we are telnetting to this to the server running in the upper half of the window and we are telling we want to get so this went wrong. Still bad request. So what did I do wrong? This is sad. I tried this a couple of times before. I'll just try it one more time if it doesn't work now. No, it doesn't work. Did something wrong. But in principle, although I did something stupid wrong, obviously, this is very much what an HTTP request looks like. It's really just a very stupid command. You're connecting to the port and you want to get the path you actually want to get. So this is really just a string. Yes, this slash could be something like /index PHP or whatever. And you're telling that you want to use HTTP 1.1 and you have to specify the host. I really don't know why it doesn't work now. Yeah, I might get something wrong. Currently, I just don't understand it in the moment. But it's important to know that there are 4 different ways of accessing the web server, which is GET. That's what you're using when you're just not using the internet by clicking on a link or entering an URL. POST, which is generally used when you are submitting a form, or patch and put, which are used when you're submitting a form to change something, and delete if you want to delete something on the server. These verbs are the different request types you can have, the different methods the servers implement. Why is this important? When you're using Rails, you have to, okay, you can leave that. You have this routes file. This file actually describes which requests can be called on the application.
And you find this file in the config directory.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So if I type something like this, I will get a routing error because no route matches get hello. And if you want to actually be able to use this route, we have to specify it here. So we have to specify we want to get hello. And we have to specify which controller is supposed to actually serve this request. Let's say we want to link this to the welcome controller and use the hello action of the welcome controller. So this is just by random the same word. It could be something different. So when we now get thank you. So this tells Rails that whenever we try to get /hello, the welcome controller is to be used, and the action of the action hello of the welcome controller is to be called. So when we reload here, we get now before we got the error that there was no route. Now we get the error is the initialized constant welcome controller. So there is no welcome controller yet, which isn't too surprising because we didn't produce it yet. So we have in the app directory, we have this controllers directory, and we now create a welcome controller. And we don't. So you can in Rails, and many tutorials do that. use scaffolding so that you just say things like Rails scaffold something and they will produce lots of code. But I think to learn things, it doesn't really help. So I prefer coding it really live now. And generally, all controllers in the application inherit from application controller. Application controller. This is application controller is the one that was produced during the Rails new, and this is really just a subclass of action controller base where you can put the stuff that you want all your controllers to share. So now we have a welcome controller living in the controllers welcome controller RB file. So if we reload, we should get the next error. The action hello could not be found for welcome controller, which isn't too surprising. All right, so what is an action? An action is really just a public method of a controller. So we can just define hello here and do something. I don't know. So if we now reload, we'll be told hello is missing a template. So it found the actual action, but it doesn't know what to render with it. So the simplest way to render something is not to produce a template, but to really just explicitly render. Which is not the way you do things normally. It's really just to explain. So this is what we did. First, we produced the actual route. So we said we want something to happen when you say when you call /hello. We produced the route, which is in config route RB, and we say it should be linked to the welcome controller hello action. So then we produced this welcome controller living in app controllers and implemented the hello action, which renders a plain result. As I said, this is not the way you do things normally. So when we don't do this, we get the error we had before. Welcome controller hello is missing a template for. So we're supposed to provide some template. These templates are living in views. And for the welcome controller, the views are supposed to live in the welcome directory. And by default, the hello HTML ERB file is the one that should be rendered. So we say this is the ERB is the templating engine, and HTML is the format.
Embedded Ruby.
Yes.
ERB stands for Embedded Ruby.
Yeah, it's used in quite a lot of places, but we won't stick to it because it's really ugly. All right, so now we have a proper template, and when reloading, we should. Yes. Lovely. This is almost magic. One thing that you might realize is that quite a lot of things are linked just by naming things correctly, or according to some default. So this is very much how the Rails system works. One of the important ideas of Rails was convention over configuration. So as long as you stick to certain naming conventions, you have to do very little specific configuration. So in the routes file, just by default, this says we want to use the welcome controller. So the word controller is just omitted there because it's just default. This is the action, and the action. This is really just some stupid string. Yeah, but at runtime it will then be deconstructed, and the controller is called. This action is called, and by default, an action is rendering the template that's living in the controllers, or in a directory called like the controller is named. So in this case, welcome, and it has the name of the actual action. We could of course render different templates. We could change everything as we like, but this is just the default behavior. And, it's pretty convenient to stick to it because it's pretty simple, and it's really just the default behavior. And once you're somewhat familiar with all this Rails stuff, you find your way pretty easily. All right. So we now have our actual view, and well, generally controllers do a little bit more than nothing. So let's just say we want to compute something in the controller and use this computed stuff in the view. So let's just take time zone now and convert it, it doesn't really matter. We just convert it to a string. Good enough. We'll just, so if we do this in IRB. All right, time zone is something that's only available in Rails. So time new will just get the string. So what we have is, we have this this string in the instance variable time of the welcome controller, and the instance variables of the controller are injected into the view. So we can go to the view and tell it's, oh no, I'm so much not familiar with this. We want to, just output the value of this time thing here. So why doesn't that work here? Time zone now. Anyway. So what we did now is, it's pretty stupid, but still, we used the controller to compute something, which is quite naive, and transferred this to the view just by putting it into an instance variable, which is a very obvious way to do it. And in the view, we outputted it using this this syntax here. So next thing, you generally have, frequently find that you are giving some kind of parameters. Say count equals 3, something like this. If you have a look at the, this is so huge. If you have a look at the console, you'll see when we just, I'll just clear it and reload so you can see it starts there. So when we were reloading, we started a GET request with this path on our server, and we got one parameter, which is count, with a value of 3, string 3. And then the log tells you it was rendering within the layout. I will come to this in a moment, and rendered the hello HTML erp file, and all this took 8 milliseconds. So now we want to use this count for something. And in general, we have params, which is a kind of hash. It is not an actual hash. It has some additional features, but with params you can access the parameters of the application, of the actual of the current request. So in this case, we say we want to get the value of count into the instance variable count. And what we do is we say This is not reasonable, but still. So we want to do this count times. All right. So yeah, this is a string. So we have to convert the string to an integer. All right. So now we can say hello a couple of times. Again, this is not something not very helpful, just to get an idea. So we have these parameters that are just injected into the controller actions using this params hash-like thingy. And if we don't give this parameter, it will be nil, and the integer version of nil is 0. So we have count like equals 0. We could do things like count equals to 1 if count 0, then it will be why didn't that work? Oh, I was just too fast. Then it will be output at least once. What's important to notice, when I'm using Sublime, I have this save on focus lost activated. So whenever I'm leaving Sublime to go to the browser, all files will be saved, all changed files will be saved. I guess that's possible with all the other frameworks too, with all the other editors, and yeah. But this is important because, of course, the Rails framework is actually working on the files in the file system and not some editor buffers or something like this. Sorry. Okay. So yeah, when we were looking at the console, we saw this rendering layout. Because the template we wrote isn't complete HTML. This is really just a fragment. And the rest of the HTML that's required around it and introduced automatically, we can have a look here. Oh, yeah, this is really... Yeah, so we have a proper HTML header, we have a proper HTML body stuff. Yeah, this mini profiler thing is responsible for this performance meter over there. It's just injected by a middleware. Well, doesn't matter, but yeah. All this stuff that's not from the template comes from a layout file, and by default, it's using the application layout, which comes from the application controller. So the application controller by default uses the application layout. If the controller wasn't called application but whatever cookie, then the cookie layout would be used. It's really just linked by naming conventions again. And as you see, for example, here, the title is the title that's given here. And in this generated layouts, this is really just totally minimal. CSRF is cross-site request forgery meta tags. So by default, Rails does cross-site request forgery protection. CSP, I really completely forgot what it is. And some minimal style sheet and minimal JavaScript files are loaded. I guess they're completely empty, but they're just there. And this yield produces the actual content. So if we did something like div style and put this around the yield, everything is around with a green box. So when you're using some CSS frameworks like Bootstrap or whatever, the general markup that's used for every view is put into the application file normally. And as I said, yield is the point where the rendered content comes from. All right. So now, yeah, we have some beautiful layout. We're able to render something into this great layout. So we should now have a look at actual business model stuff. So today we want to start with some very, very super stupid minimal calculation thing just to have something to play with. And all right. So what I want to have is I want to have a model that is called calculation, and it has three fields, three attributes, namely a first operand, the operation, and the second operand. And we want to persist these and to have them in the database, and want to be able to create them, have a look at them, delete them, and list all of them. This is what we want to go through today. So, as I already said, in Rails we are using the active record pattern. So we have an object rational mapper that's turning database rows into objects. And the model is calculation. So the table is supposed to be called calculations. And I will just say, yes,
yeah.
Yes. We're going to implement all the CRUD operations. Yes, and we're going to do it in a pretty resty way. So for those that are familiar with it, yeah. So we want to say Rails generate migration, and not as visible but calculation. So what we're doing now is these migration. So we're using the Rails generate functionality to create a file that describes the table we want to use. These files are then put into db migrate create calculation. We are using some kind of or some specific DSL here for describing the tables. You could, of course, just do this in SQL yourself if you like to, but this is generally this DSL is able to switch between different database types. So you could, for example, start with SQLite, which is the default database for development, and switch to MySQL or Postgres or whatever you like later. I'm not the biggest fan of these of this DSL, but well, it's the way things are done by default. So, as I said, we want to have three columns in this database. First, an integer column, which is called argument 1. Another integer column called argument 2, and a string column, which is called operand. So we can represent things like 1 plus 2 also. It's, I don't consider this very interesting. Yeah.
For all what he's doing there with immigration, you can find here on rubyonrails.org a guide for how to implement these migrations with all the crazy options that are available there. There are other types available, a lot of more arguments for these commands that you're writing there. So if you're searching for something more complex, so you have to look at here this guide.
Yeah, so thank you very much, because the Rails guides are really a very good documentation. So the Rails guides are really going. They are pretty thorough, and they really written quite well, so you can really use them to get going there. Unless you have some book or somebody explaining it to you.
So.
All right. So now we have used our strange DSL, and we are going to create a table. As I said, in Rails, things are conventions are an important thing in Rails. So the name of a table is generally plural, so lowercase plural. So for calculation, if you want to represent a calculation, the table name should be calculations and users and whatever's products. So now we can Rails db migrate. This db migrate command iterates over. Oh, you don't see a lot here. It iterates over the files in db migrate, sorts them by this timestamp in the beginning, and looks which of them have already been executed. It keeps track on a special table. It's called schema migrations, I guess, and it will write an entry into this table for every migration it already did. So if you're introducing a new migration and you're calling db migrate again, it will not start from the very beginning, but only those that are new are really executed. So if we do db migrate again, nothing should happen. So I hope, yes. All right. So now we have, this is really just, this changed the database only. It didn't do anything to the Rails ecosystem itself. But the Rails knows that we want to use the, so where is it, config? The database IML. So in this IML we said we want to use the db development.sqlite3 database, and this was created in the db directory too. And there should be, we can't really look at it now, but there is this table inside there now. We now want to implement the actual model. So we don't have any models yet. So we say, create a new file and say class calculation. It inherits from application record. And we save this with the name calculation RB. All right. And now this is really all we had to do, because the application record inherits from active record base. An active record base is responsible for this object rational mapping. While application record itself is abstract, calculation isn't. And so calculation expects to find some table for it. So if we now, in the upper part of the window, we started Rails server. In the lower part, we'll now start Rails console, which is abbreviated with Rails C. What we now have an IRB Rails console that is running in the context of the application. So we have everything, all the models, everything available. So if we say calculation, we just found this class, and it tells us we have to. We don't have a database connection currently. So currently it's really just the class. So if we say calculation first, for example. I will just delete my IRBs. Sorry. So, all right. When we say calculation first, Rails tries to load the first calculation. So it says select calculations, everything from calculations, order by something, and it didn't find something, which isn't too surprising because we didn't create a calculation yet. What the heck are you doing there?
I moved the picture-in-picture to the upper left.
All right. So, if you say calculation new, then we get a new calculation object, which knows about its attributes already. So everything, so there's somebody talking? I guess by accident. Every model that's created using this DSL has an ID column, which is an integer by default. And from this, so where is it here? We have this t.timestamps. This creates two columns, created at and updated at, which will be at the end, generally, and which are, Rails keeps tracks of them. So whenever a record is created, this created at is set, and whenever it's updated, the updated at is set or changed, updated. All right. So this is a new calculation, and we can create a reasonable calculation on the command line just to get the idea. Can do things like argument 1 is 23, argument 2 is 42, and operand is plus. So now we have this calculation, which was just created. It is so in memory, created in memory. So this isn't persisted yet. And we just assign it to some variable. And if we say save, the actual data is written into the database. So in SQLite, it's even within a transaction. In other database systems, transactions have to be explicit. And as you see, it uses prepared statement stuff, so it's not, you don't have trouble with SQL injection or stuff like that, because everything is sanitized just by the framework. So if you put this good old Bobby Tables stuff in there, there's no danger of something really going wrong. So now our calculations table has one entry. We can just have a look at it. Say calculation.count, which is, so calculation is the class, and we say how many calculations do we have, and we have one. It's quite convenient that Rails always prompts the actual SQL that's generated, especially when you're using more complex stuff. It really helps understanding what's going on there. This is, of course, something that's done only in development mode. When running in production, we don't log all the SQL nonsense. Makes things pretty slow. All right, so in principle, we have this calculations model. And as I said, we didn't do an awful lot of stuff for it to work. We really just created the table. An active record keeps track of everything else. So so now we have this model that is not able to do something reasonable, but it's just just a container for the data. Yes, sure. It's mainly gem install MongoDB and inherit from Mongo wrapper something stuff. So there are bindings for or this is not active record then, but it's something similar. So I think it's called Mongoid. But this is just available, and it's very much the same but the difference is, when you're using Mongo, you have to provide the the attributes that you want to use, because Mongo, the Mongo storage itself doesn't have this kind of structural information. But yeah, using Mongo is pretty convenient if you just want to get going quickly. We used this a couple of times, but at least for the stuff that we are doing, the integrity that SQL or proper databases provide is quite valuable. So we stick to that. So yeah, Mongo can be used pretty easily, but we'll not go into this now. We can probably talk about this at another point. And for example, replacing SQL, yes? This is here in this, yes. Oh, what are you doing? Oh no, this is American layout. Yeah, so this is the definition of the table structure is done in the migration file. And there are other migration types, for example, adding for adding columns, deleting columns, adding indices, and all this kind of stuff that can be done there too. All right. So now we have this model, and we want to have a look at it using the web application. So what we need routes to actually do this manipulation stuff, and there are, well, the Rails way to do it is just to say resources, calculations. This creates quite a couple of routes. Just use another terminal window because you can always say Rails routes, and this will. Oh yeah, there are some automatically generated Rails routes. But these aren't interesting currently. You can use them to do maintenance stuff and introspection stuff during development, but this is not important. These are the routes that were created using our routes file. So the first of it is this hello route we produced, which maps to /hello and to the welcome controller hello action. And then we'll have a calculations, which goes to the calculations controller index action. A post to calculations, which goes to calculations create, a get to calculations /new, which calls the new action, edit, calculations ID edit, which goes to the edit action, another get action that goes to calculations /ID, which is the show action, and patch and put are used simultaneously for update and delete to destroy. These are all just created by using this generate, by using this resources calculations command in the routes file. So these are just routes, so there's no implementation for them yet. It's really just the system knows that when you're calling /calculations, the calculations, the index action of the calculations controller is to be called. So we can try that. Don't need this one anymore. Calculations. All right. So it didn't find the calculations controller. Again, this is just fine because we didn't implement it yet. So controllers, new file, calculations controller inherits from application controller All right, so same game, reloading should tell us there is no index section there. So it happens. All right, so we implement index. And what we do here is we say calculations is calculation all. So calculation.all just gets all entries of the calculations table. And again, we don't have a view for it so far, so we'll create this. Yes. No. The class name of the model is singular. Yeah. This is. I'm doing this wrong all the time. In general, I type the S and have to change it later. The name of the controller is plural by default, but the model is always singular because it's just you have calculation new. This is just right because calculations.new is just it would be wrong. So I don't know. It's just a convention. So we have to create the another folder in the views directory, which is called calculations. That's calculations. And I already typed HTML slim. I hate ERB. It's just a total bloat. Slim is the way you want to write HTML, but slim isn't there by default in Rails. It's a templating language. You'll see how it's used in a second. And because we want to use it, we have to write it into the gem file. So the gem file is the place. It's like a package JSON. It's the place where all the dependencies are listed, and when you're so if you want to use some additional gems, you say gem slim. I don't know the current version, so for now we just omit it.
Please just show rubygems.org just to show where to find gems.
Rubygems.org. Then I search for slim, and the current version is 401. You will get an idea about which versions are there, when the last update was, and where to find documentation and the source code and all this kind of stuff. In general, almost all gems or everything in the Rails world uses semantic versioning. So the current version is 4.1, I guess. What did I say? 4.1.0, yeah. So you can specify the versions of the. So if you completely omit the version, it will just use the newest it can find. And if you say just 4.1, it won't update it because it will just stick to it. Same with equals. This will update to any new version. And tilde greater will update to versions that are newer in the last specified digit. So this might update to 4.2, but not to 5. So this is generally the way the designed version is specified. Yeah. So for example, for turbolinks, they said, all right, no matter, every new version could be used, but we'll just stick to the 4 series of slim. And then you have to actually restart the server. And first, I'll do it in this window because see a little bit more. You have to say bundle, and bundle just takes care of installing all the required dependencies, and And you see here using Slim 410, because it was already installed. Otherwise, it would have gotten it from the from Ruby gems. And you now see that the gem file lock was changed. And if we look what changed there, you see that Slim was added, and the dependencies Slim itself were added. And this gem file lock is again similar to the stuff used in JavaScript, is used to install the required exactly the required dependencies, not some matching versions, but exactly those that were used during development. So when you're deploying to a server, you can be sure that exactly the same gem versions will be installed. So this is what this gemfile.log is for. This should never be edited by hand normally. I could have committed in between. Anyway. All right, so now we have Slim. And we restart the server. And when we're reloading here, we see nothing, which is not too surprising because the index file we created was just empty. So Slim is a little bit Python-esque, using indentation for block building. So we say we have an H1 all calculations, and then we have a paragraph saying actually it's and then we create a table. TH operand 1 operation operand 2, and then we take the body and we say calculations each do calculation, and we have a rather row and 3 columns. First being calculation, I thought it called argument 1. All right, let's just have a brief look whether this works. Oh, I was too fast again. Woo! So with Slim, you really write that much of HTML that's strictly necessary. I think everybody who already used HTML in one way or another should pretty much understand what's going on here. For this H1, so if you just have or every line begins with a marker, and lines starting with some kind of text are just tags, not texts, but tags. So this produces an H1 tag, which is closed in the same line because there's nothing indented below it. So lines starting with a pipe symbol contain text. In texts, you can use these hash syntax to do interpolation again. That could be done here too. If you just want to output something, it can be done like that. So a line starting with an equal sign will just output the evaluation of the right-hand side. So it didn't change at all. And yeah, this creates the table tag, and again, this is indented, so the table tag is closed when the indentation ends, the corresponding indentation ends. One of the huge advantages of this is you can't possibly get the wrapping wrong. So you can never close a div when you open the P or something like that. This is saves a lot of work, especially when changing or moving blocks of code around. You can never get anything wrong. So we are using this Slim only. I think we have no ERB files at all anymore. And I really promote this a lot. So I'd suggest you use Slim too. Of course, you don't have to. There's another thing that's called Haml, which is quite similar in the Ruby world. But yeah, for us, we think Slim is the best, and it's not slower than ERB. It's very, very much competitive. This is just static code, and then we have calculations. Each do calculation. So we are doing this looping. Code lines starting with a dash are evaluated but not output. So the result of the evaluation is not printed. In contrast to the equals version, and then the iteration is done, and for each calculation a row is printed, and there are three columns where again the arguments are output. By default, the result of the evaluation is being HTML escaped. So if you have ampersands or greater than or less than signs, they will be escaped. So you can be pretty sure there's nothing going wrong, even if you have bobby tails amongst your students. All right. So just for shits and giggles again, I said you could do internationalization by default. So if we just say we want to translate all calculations, we won't do this consequently for everything, but just to get an idea. This is the way you say I want to use internationalized strings. If you're then reloading, too fast again? No. So if there's a missing translation, the capitalized version of the key that was put in before is printed, so that you have something reasonable to read, and a span is added, which tells you which key exactly is missing. So in this case, it's en calculations index all calculations. So when you're starting your interpolation string with a dot, the path of the current view is used for namespacing, and we could just add it here. So en, so blah blah. Yeah, this is just some example stuff. Calculations index. This is using YML. YML ain't no markup language. This is just some simplified XML version. So it's not XML. It's much simpler. Just to have something different than before, and reloading provides you with the internationalized version. And just to give you a chance to have a look at it, we can say something like it's so many count when just reloading, it will return this it's so many and tell us it's missing. and we can then so many, yeah. What is this dollar? Is this percent? Maybe percent sign? Yeah. All right. Always mixing these up. So you can use interpolation in these localized strings too, which is quite convenient, and it's pretty easy to get this set up and running. You could also say things like, so this internationalization stuff is going very deep into the libraries. So we can say things like calculation, human attribute, name, argument 1. Yeah, and then we have put an equal sign in front so that it's being evaluated. And it will first be argument 1, and again it tells us, no, it doesn't tell us anything. Oh no, in this case it's really just, this is the fallback is silent, but it is active record attributes calculation argument 1. So this is just the default behavior. So when you're translating the attributes of an active record model, this is just the path where the keys are put. There are some libraries that help you keeping track of the missing translations. Some do things like after the request has been finished, it will print out the missing keys. So I encountered these keys during the request, and which I didn't find a value for. And there are some other libraries that could be used that help you even create certain files, and so help you keeping track of it. So, but this is the important part. So internationalization is there from the very beginning. All right. So now we have this this table, and we add another column. This is an action column, and we will say. We want to have a show action for these calculations. So we say, first let's do it like this. We say we want to have an anchor with a href, and now, as you might not remember, when we had a look at these routes, we have this prefix column. And for the calculation /id path, it's the prefix is calculation. So Rails produces helpers called like these prefixes. So there's a calculation path helper, calculation path that gets a calculation as a parameter, and this produces a link that points to calculations / the current ID. And we'll just write show there. So reloading. Right. So we now got this show link, which is pointing to calculation /1, which is the ID of the calculation we created at the command line before. So if we click there, the action show could not be found, which is not surprising again. We go to the calculations controller and define the show action. Define show. And if we just do some arbitrary garbage here, reload, name error. But what I want to show to you, we get a parameter ID. This ID comes from the route definition. So in the routes, we said calculations slash something should map to this route and make this something to the ID. So if we don't have a 1 here, but some other number, the ID should be, well, of course, the other number. But we want to show this first calculation. So what we do is we say calculation equals calculation, and then use the find method of calculation and use the params ID. Again, this produces, we can just go back to the command line and see what happens when we're doing this interactively. Calculation find of 1. It will do select calculations, blah, 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 where ID is 1. If we put the string 1 here, it works just exactly the same way. If we put in the string I minus, it will just convert it to the string again. And if we add some garbage here, it just tells us it doesn't know how to deal with it because it's just not reasonable ID. And this would interactively or in the web application really just raise an error too. All right. So we find the calculation by its ID, and when reloading, no template. Again, we didn't implement a template yet. So where are they? Oh, it's app. App, views, calculations, new file, show HTML slim. And we put everything into an H1, it really doesn't matter. And what we do is we just calculation. Really just putting out the formal thing that should be computed. And if we want to, for adding spaces, so if you have a look at the so where is this? Haven't used this for ages. I just want to have a look at the actual HTML markup sources. This is what I wanted. Okay.
What you're looking for, the source of the website?
Yes.
Just right-click.
I didn't find it. Just find this inspector. I normally don't use the sources. This is the index.js. This is not what I want.
I have it.
Oh yeah, here we go. So, oh yeah, you don't see this. Slim doesn't add any indentation, doesn't add any white spaces, unless you explicitly want it to. So around this plus sign, there are no white spaces. But if you say equals greater than, then a white space will be added behind the result of the line. If you say less than, there will be a white space in front of it. So like this, we should have white spaces around the plus. Just, yeah, to know. And of course, we want to say what's the actual result of this which is calculation result. And this is not implemented yet. Merp. Undefined method result for calculation. So we go to the calculation model. and say result. And then we do just some stupid case switch. Case operand. So when the values of the attributes are not instance variables, they are just formal function calls. So operand is a function call, which gives the value of the operand column. So and we can say when plus, then argument 1 plus argument 2, and minus times and divide. Really just shits and giggles. Else all right, so when reloading, we get the result, the computation. So to access the values of the corresponding columns, you just use the names of the columns as a function names. So you don't formally declare this somehow. This is really just doing magically. When the Rails system is booting up, it has a look at the database structure and determines which columns have which types and will do all the typecasting required. So when you're trying to put some random string into an integer column, it will just break. It will just tell you this is not possible. And if you say and anyway every value is being sanitized before put into the database. Okay, so now we can have a look at calculations. Put some white space around the equal sign. Yeah, quite neat. All right, and we want a backlink. And there is so one way to write it is just say href equals to calculations path, and if you just add some text behind, you can just write back, you'll have this backlink. So we can just jump around. But there is, in Rails, there are certain view helpers, for example, link to, which does very much the same thing. But has, under certain circumstances, it has its advantages to use these view helpers. But in principle, for now, it's just the same thing. All right, so we are now able to have a look at these. Next thing is we want to create a new calculation. So we add, just use this link to, it doesn't really matter. Link to new calculation. And this is the new calculation path. Again, let's have a brief look at the routes. New calculation maps to a GET request going to calculations/new. So when we reload, you should see this new calculation thing mapping to calculations/new. Again, there is new action. No new action. Calculations controller, def new, and in the HTTP world, we don't have a lot of status, so these new pages generally just show a form that enables you to later on save the results of this form. So we don't, at this point, we don't create anything. We just we just show you the form to type in your data, and just when submitting, the data is actually saved to the database before the database isn't touched. In general, there may be certain situations where you do it other, but this is generally the way it's done. And what we do here is we say calculations equals to calculation.new. So we just initialize a variable calculation with an empty calculation, which does nothing reasonable. It's just there to have something to talk about. And again, create a file, new HTML slim. New calculation. All right. So what we now need to do, we now just create a form. And we could, of course, just create just plain stupid HTML form as you normally do. But in Rails, there is generally a slightly better way to do it, which is using helpers. And this helper is form 4. Form 4 calculation. Do. And what we get is a form builder object. So we say we want to create a form for calculation, and we then get this builder object f. And we can now say f.label operand 1. And text field operand 1. Let's just have a brief look what happens. Oh no, it's not operand, it's argument 1. Okay, so now we have some kind of form here. Well, by the way, I do know this is incredibly ugly. You'd normally use something like Bootstrap or whatever to style the stuff. But for now, I just want to really go into the total basics. What we get is we have this form, which has a proper class, a reasonable class, a reasonable ID. It maps to the /calculations using the method post, which is the create action later. It adds some hidden field authenticity token. This is for cross-site request forgery prevention. And produces a label that is properly linked to its input. So we can, rather conveniently use these to set up the form. Again, I do know this is not the way to do it, but I still adjust. Oh yeah, I got the indentation wrong. We have to stay. Obviously, we have to stay within the nesting of this block. Otherwise, we are outside the scope, and the f wouldn't be defined anymore. So the do for this, or the end for this do, is implicitly added at the end of the indentation. All right. So now we have operand 1, operand 1. Oh yeah, this is that's what. By the way, here you see what happens when you're adding the human attribute translation stuff. Then by default, the label thing will look up the I18N localizations. Okay, and then we add some. Yeah, the simplest thing is just say f.submit. What? No. No, that you just try to challenge us. All right, so we have these operand. Yeah, this is the naming is just plain stupid. I just changed the this to argument 1. So things look less stupid now, probably. All right, so I just added the submit button, which just produces some stupid input submit. And now we can push that button, or we could just enter something. 66 operand times 2, create calculation. What happened? We got we got a post to /calculations. This post to /calculations is it's that route. So post to /calculations maps to calculations controller create action. So this is how everything's wired. And so we need to def create. And we just add a debugger here and reload. And then at the command line, we just inside this we're now inside this this controller code here, and we can now have a look at the params, the parameters that this request actually has. So params is an action controller parameters object. It has some authenticity token. This is automatically managed by Rails, so I never ever had an actual look at the authenticity token myself, but it just makes sure you can't hand over your form to somebody else, so such that somebody else is accidentally submitting your form. And then there is this calculation parameter, which has 3 subparameters: argument 1, operand, and argument 2, and some unimportant stuff like the commit, the value of the submit button, and the name of the current controller and the action of the current controller, but this isn't important. So the important part is params calculation. And we now have argument 1 star and argument 2. So what you'd expect to happen is that you could say calculation.new of this. Because this is exactly how we created the calculation before. Handing over a hash with the argument 1 operand and argument 2 values. But this raises an error. Forbidden attributes. So you have to explicitly whitelist the attributes you want to assign. So you just can't just assign arbitrary attributes, but you have to explicitly do that. So the way it's done normally is you define, this may be a private method if you like, private def, calculation params, and then this is something you just have to know. The gem that's responsible for this is strong parameters. Params requires calculation. That is, you have to have the key calculation, and you then permit the values argument 1, operand, argument 2. And we can then say calculation equals to calculation new of calculation params. Then say calculation save and redirect to calculation path of calculation. Lowercase. So when we are calling this create action, we are producing a new calculation in memory, persisting, and then redirecting to the corresponding show action. So let's just try this again. Or it's not require, it's require. This is something I get wrong all the time. So yeah, we said 66 times 2 equals 123, or whatever. And we automatically got a redirect to the show action of this calculation, and we can return, and you can now see we have 2 calculations. So currently, for the operand, we could enter anything, which doesn't make any sense at all, because the operands can be only one of the 4 we had a look at. We defined in the result method. And on the other hand, the arguments need to be there, otherwise it doesn't make any sense either. So we need to add some validation. So we need to make sure that only certain values can be put into these columns. Validates. And we want to validate all 3 of them to be there. So argument 1, argument 2, and operand with presence. So these should be validated to be there. So presence just means it's there. Then we need to validate operand with inclusion in and I'll prefer to operands to have this in some class constant, just to keep things neat and tidy. Star slash and slash. All right. So
obviously you find all this again on Ruby on Rails guides. Here, there's a whole chapter about these validations. You can do crazy stuff with these validations. There are a lot of helper functions for validation. So yeah, if you want to go deeper in this, just look there. Maybe we get deeper into this later on in this course, but yeah, for today, I think.
Yeah, I think for today, that should probably be it. Thank you. So what happens? I'll just have a look at it on the command line first, because it's just better for explaining. So if we say calculation, yes. Not computation. If we say calculation new, and we say operand 1 is 3, and argument 1, thank you. Argument 1 is 3, and argument 2 is 8. Sign this. And we then ask, is this calculation valid actually? We get a false, so this is not valid. And we then can ask whether there's an errors object. Errors, yeah. And we will get an errors object saying, all right, so the object we're talking about is this calculation. And there is a full messages method on this just to make things readable. So operands can't be blank, operand is not included in the list. So we forgot to provide an operand. If we now provide an operand, and we're using III as an operand, and again check validity, then operand is not included in the list is the error message. So if we now try to save this, we get false, because it just isn't able to save. And as you saw, there's no SQL going on, because it didn't touch the database. And there is another saved version with a bang at the end. And this is used to either save or raise an error. So the save bang version is, so it's saving if it is possible, otherwise it will raise an error. The normal save will return true or false depending on whether it worked or not. So what we need to do now is, in this create thing, we first create this calculation based on the parameters we got from the request. And now, if calculation save, this means everything was fine. We can do our redirect and be happy. Else, this is the case, we could not save for some reason. Then we just render new again. So this means we will render the view named view. The view named new. And we need to have this calculation thing in the instance variable, otherwise it won't be accessible for the view. So let's try what happens. Argument 1, create, merp. So we just got redirected there. The values still stay inside. But the entry was not saved. And if you have a look at this, a wrapper called field with errors is added around the label. So we could do something like, again, just this is very, very, very ugly, but I just do it inline. Yeah, new calculation, create calculation, merp. Yeah, this is very, very ugly, but still, you see, these are not allowed values. Okay, so this is fine now. This is still not fine. And we can access the actual errors. So we can do something like if calculation valid. So if the calculation is not valid, we just add an unordered list and calculation errors, full messages, each do message, and output the message. Yeah. So argument 1 can't be blank, argument 2 can't be blank, and so on. If calculation.errors is the better. This is better because the errors hash is only populated when trying to either save or when explicitly asking for validity. Pardon?
Yeah.
So when calling new, it's just, of course, this is not a valid record, but it's just plain stupid to add some validation status at somehow. So we now add some. We have proper inputs for arguments, but the operand is still broken, and it will tell us the operand can't be blank and the operand is not included in the list. It could be easily be added in a way that the error messages are written at the actual attributes. This wouldn't be too hard, but I'll just skip this for now. And since we don't actually, we're not free in our operand, so we can just, I guess that's the right way. I haven't tried this for a long time. Collection, calculation, operands. Yeah, okay. So now you have to, or you could, no, so this is calculation colon, is just stupid. This collection colon is just not necessary. You can now choose the operand from a list. This is then, this list is currently just a constant, but it could of course be database objects in some way. You could use whatever you like for the collection pass to the select thing. So now we can't get a wrong operand, we can't even omit it, but it's still, of course, it's still important to have the validations, because some evil user of your great calculate tool could just change the values in the select, and could just add a value of ampersand or whatever here, and 1, 2, and then it will still find that the operand was not valid. This is necessary to prevent injection of invalid data. But now, of course, the select is fixed, and we could just save it, and we'll see that 1 plus 2 equals 3. All right. So next thing, we want to change a calculation. It's just what you normally do with these structured stuff. You want to have it compute something different. This is then the edit calculation path. Again, you find it here, and edit calculation is the prefix underscore path. Has to be added to use it, and it goes to there's a get request going to calculations ID edit. All right, so reloading. We have this edit link, and it maps to calculations /1/edit. Merp, no action edit could be found. Back to the calculations controller. Again, showing the edit view doesn't change anything. It's really just offering you the form, and it doesn't touch the database. It doesn't change anything in the database. So what to show the form, all we have to do is get the calculation and show the form. So we don't change anything yet. So all right, we load the calculation, which is supposed to be edited, and add a new edit. Slim file. And now we find that this is almost the same as the new calculation. It's the same form in principle, just that's it's the same form, but the calculation came from a different place. So what you can do, or what we want to do, we don't want to repeat this. We don't want to have another file with the same, or mainly the same content. So what we do is we produce a partial, and we call this underscore form, for example. So every files starting with an underscore are always supposed to be partials. So are supposed to be used to are used inside other views. So in the new we say render form, and in the we say render form 2. So now we have this edit calculation. It's pre-populated with the values that were inside the calculation from the very beginning. And whilst when calling it as a new, the form will, the action will be /calculations. And if you're editing, it will be calculations/id. The method is still post, but this is just because browsers are stupid. So the support for put and patch methods in browsers isn't safe. So there's a hidden field called underscore method having the value patch in this case. So this is, in fact, this is a patch method. This patch method is going to /calculations/id. So it's supposed to call calculations update. Oh, we can just click the button, update calculation. The action update could not be found. And just steal the code over here. And we steal the code over here. So first, we take the calculation given by the current ID, because it is already there. And there is a method called update, using the calculation params. And this, in the same way as the as with save, it returns true if the update was successful, and it returns false if the update could not be performed. And if it was successful, we just return to the calculation path, which is fine. Yeah, we just show the calculation itself, the changed. Otherwise, we render the edit view. All right, so it worked. And I want to add 600 and update, and it's now 66 plus 600. And of course, if we omit one of the arguments, it will not be able to save, and the original entry will not be touched. So it's just the database wasn't changed, because it just the validation didn't work out. All right. So there's just one more CRUD action missing, which is deleting. All right, and this is delete. I want to remove it, and to see how this is done, there's a delete method on calculations/id, which will go to this destroy action. I don't know why. I think the naming isn't. Yeah, but anyway. So when we are doing a delete request, that wasn't the button I wanted to press, to the calculations path, the deletion is done. So, but there is not, there's no way to have a normal anchor have causing a delete method. But in Rails,
Yeah.
okay. So this would just be the same show call, but if we add a data minus method equals delete, then there is some unobtrusive JavaScript, UJS, that comes bundled with Rails and is included by default, that will take care of changing the type of the request to delete. Hopefully. So. All right. So now, if we try to delete it, the action destroy could not be found. So, as you see, yeah. So there's a lot of backtrace. Yeah, we got a delete request on calculations/3, but the destroy action could not be found. This is true because we didn't implement it yet. So def destroy, and what we have to do, we take the calculation, and we calculation dot destroy. This is a method provided by Active Record, very much the same as update or create or save all. And afterwards we have to redirect somewhere, and I guess it's to the calculations. It's the calculations path, which is the index path, and the then the calculation should be gone. Good. All right. So sadly, we have no proper feedback here. So we just deleted it, but we didn't. You'd normally expect to have some kind of box showing up telling you, well, something happened. For this purpose, there is a flash. And you say flash success equals to successfully deleted. And one thing to keep in mind, a redirect means there will be a new request. So we'll jump to the index view, to the index action, but it's not within the same request. But the browser is told to reload the page on another path. And the great thing about this flash thing is it uses the session management to survive exactly one reload. So in the index, so when this index action is rendered, the value of the flash is still there, and if you reload again, it will be gone. So this is the magic behind this flash thing. And we should probably call it Sukutsukuses. And we have to, yeah, we could either put this into the index view, or we could just go and put this into the layout and say, oh, so this is ERP then again, hate it. If flash, oh no, other way, let's do it like this. Flash each do status a message. did this for ages. Needs to be done like this. So we have to. I want to add this as a class. So we want to have flash minus status. Well, I think typing this is just sufficiently much advertisement for the slim stuff. Yeah. All right. So div closing. So for each flash that is currently defined, there's just one, I guess. There will be a box here which has has a class so that you could color it black, green, blue, red, whatever you like. So let's have a look. So if we delete this, then you find successfully deleted over here. And this div has the class flash success, and you could do styling to make this green or whatever, and go away after a certain time or something like this. So this is how the flash can be used, and you could also, in the calculations controller, do things like this: successfully updated, and error could not update. And same here, successfully created. Could not create. Yeah, that's mainly the ones that are reasonable. So if we create a new calculation, you could not create. Successfully created. Going back to the index, the flash is gone. And if we edit it, could not update, and successfully updated. So now we have well, all the interaction that is normal for a web application to show to the user, so that you know what to do. But there's one thing that is slightly dangerous, because deleting is so easy. And again, with this UJS of Rails, you can say data minus confirmation. So it's data minus confirm, I guess. I always get this wrong. And you'll be asked whether or not you're fine with it, and you can. So if I say cancel, it will not. The call is interrupted, and if you say okay, it will go through. All right. So now we see this is stupid, because there is this empty table. This is something that you don't want to have. So we could put something around this. So if calculations.present. So if there are any calculations, we want to put the table there. Otherwise, we just write down there are no calculations. So if we add a new one, then we get the table as desired. So this is mainly a roundup of all the CRUD stuff. For those that have had connection with REST, you should see that this is the route management is pretty much how it's done with REST. So for a REST client, you'd expect the routes to be exactly like this. And we could just quickly add another fancy thing. So, for example, let's take the index action. So, it might be interesting to add some JSON clients. So, respond to do format. Format.json. So if the format of the request is a JSON request, you could just say render JSON calculations.to JSON and format.html. Just render index. So nothing changes here. But if I say calculations.json, I will get the a JSON list, and for those who like XML, we could also add a version to get XML. All right, so for calculation, the to.xml needs to be implemented. There's no proper returning, no proper to.xml for the calculations. But you could add that, and then you'd be fine to have a proper XML output there too. So we can easily add different formats. You could, in the same way, you could add something like Excel or PDF or whatever formats for the output. Although, of course, to create a PDF format, you'd have to do some typesetting. Of course, yeah. Rails doesn't know how to produce proper PDF of these calculations. But you can handle the format yourself, and this is done in this respond to format, respond to do format block. This is responsible for this handling. All right, Christoph, you remember? I think this is mainly what we want to talk about, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's mainly it
For today.
for today. Yes. Do you have any immediate questions? Anything I can tell you? Would you want to explain about the assignments?
Yes. Yuri, you want to say something?
Notice used for the Webpacker stuff. So it's just the for the. Today we didn't talk about any JavaScript or CSS stuff, but for this there's a node used deep down below. But the server itself is not a node server. Yeah. So Rails. So this Rails does not, or Ruby does not provide promises yet. This is something that's they are working on. But you have you can use it multi-threaded. So this is you don't have an event loop, but you can use just threads if you want to. And if you want to do things like WebSockets. There's a library inside. This is this channel stuff. Action cable is the part of Rails that's responsible for that. I guess we'll go into this later on to have a look at that.
Yep. Any more questions?
Yes. If I remember correctly, this is something you're supposed to fix in the assignment, isn't it?
We talked about it, but I forgot it.
Oh. Is make a new calculation. Let's say, whoops. Divide by 0. Create. So this is the default arrow page that's used in Rails during development. So this is important. You don't get to see this on the when you're using in Rails in production. You're not even getting to see this when you're using running in production in development and accessing the page from a different machine. So this is really because you're actually looking at the code then. By the way, on this arrow page you can do you can have a look. You can do evaluations in this context. So argument 1. Argument 2, you can operand. So you can really interactively play around with the at exactly the state where the thing stopped. So yeah, in production you just get a plain old stupid error 500. Something went wrong. We're very sorry. Whatever nonsense page. But of course you could and should intercept that here. So you should take care to present something more reasonable. You could either do it by just checking whether argument 2 is 0 beforehand and returning the string "I won't try this," or using begin rescue end to handle to wait for the exception and handle it later on. That's mainly your decision. Both is fine. As I said, either we using exception handling or checking these beforehand and handling it in a proper way. So this anyway. Of course, this is not a reasonable application. This is just to play around, but I thought this is very much the minimal thing you could do to have something, to look at.
So, any more questions? No? Okay. Say it again. Yes,
Okay.
of course. Did you get it?
I didn't understand it properly. The difference between the ampersand? All right. Every employee is a person, so employee should be a subclass of person. So it doesn't have any functional differences, I think. So we didn't ask for that, but it's really just supposed to be a subclass of person. Yeah, this might be underspecified. I think we didn't. One thing, what we originally wanted to do, we may have forgotten that, is say that only employees have rooms, but it may very much have happened that we forgot to specify that. Apologies.
Yeah.
Yeah, the employee is the more specific one. So every employee is a person, not the other way around. But there, I think we really forgot to
Yeah.
add specific features for the employees. So it was pretty much nonsense. Yes, I think so, Yuri. They have mail and phone. Oh well, we could omit that.
Yeah. So, more questions? No? Okay. Then to assignment 2. I forgot the deadline. The deadline is obviously the same as it was in assignment 1. It's Friday next week. So I add that later to this post. This is just this assignment is essentially just to repeat what Peter did in the last 2 hours.
So we won't provide you with the code that I produced here. So you have to type everything yourself.
Yeah. So just build a calculator application like Peter did. And in addition, handle the division by 0. And just push it to GitHub and create a pull request like you did or you will did tomorrow for the assignment 1. Put here 2 links. One is to the guides from Ruby and the other is the Slim language reference. Here's the documentation, which is a bit interesting to work with, but you will get used to it. That's about the assignment 2. Just repeat, just try to build your own calculator. You're free to add
bells and whistles.
Bells and whistles, yes. If you want to add more, a little bit of CSS or Bootstrap, if you like. But I think we'll add Bootstrap later on.
Oh, one thing. There's one thing I have to tell you about Slim briefly, at least. Would you mind switching to my?
Yeah.
What we haven't done here, if you just type something like this will produce a div with a class alert and the ID foo. And if you have some other things like an ul dot users, it will create it will add the class users to the unordered list. So you can specify classes and IDs just by writing it down in such a CSS stylish way. This is very convenient and allows you to have have very, very concise HTML code. But you can still add things like class equals to whatever, and the classes will be added. So the ones that are specified using the dot notation will be, or the ones written down with the class equals to are added to the dot ones. So this is one of the most important features. So when you're using Bootstrap, you can do things like .row, .col sm3, .col sm whatever 9. I think there's a for people that had something to that ever played with Bootstrap. This is familiar. And this is so much more readable than all this diff nonsense you have to write in normal HTML. This is something that you should, when using Slim with proper CSS frameworks, you should definitely use this notation because it makes things so much easier. Just a brief advertisement.
Okay. So that's pretty much it for today. Did you get what you have to do with the assignment too, or are there any questions? I think it's quite easy. No, it's a lot of work, but I think next week we will start with a continuous project. So yeah, then we will create a new Rails application. From then on, the assignments will take place in the same repository. So we add more and more functionality to your Rails application. And yeah, I think we will talk about the running example next week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm still not completely sure what to do.
Yeah. Okay. So see you next week.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you for your attention and have a nice day.